What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another video on the YouTube channel. I'm AJ. We're going to be talking MMA, so let's get into today's video. Today, I'm going to be breaking down, in a tier list format, the best dark horses currently around in the UFC. So, in this tier list, obviously, it's not just the best dark horses, it's also going to be a few ones that aren't as good. And also, you can also see the red tier, we have not gonna make it, aka washed, okay? So let's just get right into this tier list. Starting off, we've got none other than Azamat Murkanov. I'm gonna put him in C tier. So the thing with Azamat Murkanov is that I'd say he's talented all around. He's competing in the light heavyweight division right now. I think his athleticism, which is very sneaky, is what really makes him a bit of a dark horse in this division. However, he is 34 years old, so it's starting to get to that point where it's, now or never. But at the same time, he's undefeated, 13-0. I just think now it's time for him to get a big matchup. I already know he's had cancelled bouts versus Volkan Ozdemir and Killer Roundtree. So, something similar right now could definitely solidify his dark horse status, as I think he can beat one of these upper echelon guys, break into the rankings, compete with around the top 10. So for that, I'm just going to put him in B tier. Or no, actually C tier. So moving on, we've got another light heavyweight, and it is Vitor Petrino. I'm also gonna put Vitor Petrino in the C tier, as I don't think he's gonna challenge for the belt anytime soon. But at the same time, he is only 26 years old, and he is a specimen, a real Brazilian specimen. So obviously right now he's on a bit of a streak in the light heavyweight division. Just recently beat and retired Tyson Pedro. So far 4 wins in the UFC, another one in the Contender Series. I can't really say that he should be doing anything better. It's just more so that he should get these bigger matchups, as he already has been booked against Anthony Smith on UFC 301. So, this should be another good matchup for him to really show where he's at. And, I obviously do predict him to win that matchup quite easily. But obviously Anthony Smith is a veteran, so could be a bit tricky. But we'll see where he's at. Next up, we've got Felipe dos Santos. So, unfortunately for you shoot the box Felipe dos Santos enjoyers, he's going to go in the not going to make it tier. The thing about Felipe dos Santos is, unfortunately, he sold us all the dream, versus Manel Cap, the most based UFC fighter currently. He came in on short notice, and he gave an excellent performance, really displaying the best of his abilities. But at the same time, it's not like he necessarily won any rounds in that fight. And in his next fight versus Victor Altamirano, which took place pretty recently, he pulled off a split decision victory. It was very controversial, but I do see how he could have won that fight, so I'm not too against it. Not a robbery or anything, but still, it's just a bit of a downgrade in expectations of what we would have thought about Felipe dos Santos' current skill level. But at the same time, only 23 years old, so I'm not going to completely write him off. But at the same time, he's going in the not going to make it tier. Okay, so moving on, Mateusz Rebecki. I'm going to put Mateusz Rebecki in the B tier. So Mateusz Rebecki competing in obviously the most competitive division in the UFC, lightweight division. He is 31 years old, and he does have a 16 win streak with a record of 19-1. So as I've said with a few of these other fighters, He's in this dark horse category. As you know, he hasn't really made a name for himself yet, but this should be the year where he steps up to that next level, starts getting into the rankings, digging deeper into them. But he's scheduled to fight Joel Alvarez. I think he wins that fight. Obviously a very skilled opponent in Joel Alvarez. And right now, I'd say his best win is Loic Radzhabov, who recently had a good win versus Al Sawadi. So, yeah, just going to put him in the B tier. I do think he could compete with some of the better lightweights. I mean, definitely better ranked lightweights. Like a good example I'm probably going to use a few times is like Bobby Green. I think he's ranked 15 for 16th, and like obviously Rebecki would beat Bobby Green, I'd say, pretty confidently. So he's a dark horse for that reason. He could definitely be higher ranked. Next up, we've got Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and he is going right into the S tier because he is a future champ. So now hear me out guys. The thing about Anthony Hernandez is this guy, he just has what it takes, okay? 30 years old, middleweight division, doesn't have an insane physique or anything, but like this guy, he has that dog in him, okay? The cardio is there, the grit, the determination, and at the end of the day, he has the tools available to become a champion, I'd say. So recently, he derailed the hype train of Kopylov, and he did this in incredible fashion. He was able to execute his game plan perfectly, just grind out Roman Kopylov, take him down to the ground. Even though Kopylov had improved his takedown defense, he managed to take him down. It only took 1-2 takedowns until he started crawling onto his back and was able to lock in that rear naked submission. Obviously, right now, he's on a 5-fight win streak. I also think his submission over Rodolfo Vieira is pretty impressive considering his jiu-jitsu accolades. So I just think Fluffy Hernandez, once he starts getting these better matchups in the middleweight division, he'll really establish himself. Maybe, bring some more attention to his name, and I really think he can be a future champ. Give it 3 years, 4 years max. Really, he can compete with a lot of these middleweight guys right now, and yeah, I just think he should get a good matchup next. I'm trying to think of someone who he should fight next. I'm not sure, but definitely start off with maybe someone around the top 10 in middleweight. He could fight Jack Hermansson. I think that would be a pretty easy matchup for him. He can fight Imavov. That would also be a good matchup where I see him getting a submission. So, moving on, we've got Michel Pereira. I'm going to put him in the C tier. So, Michel Pereira, ever since he moved from welterweight to middleweight, has just stepped up his game completely. I think it has a lot to do with the amount of weight he was cutting. And he had this issue of gassing out early. Obviously, he likes to flaunt a lot, hit those emotes in the cage. But now at middleweight, he just looks like a new fighter, honestly. Like, he's able to just be more precise with what he does. He's good on the feet, excellent submissions. So, considering also his recent performance versus Olenjacek, I see him being able to probably beat a lot higher ranked opponent and climb into those rankings. So without further ado, let's get into the next guy, who is going to be Guram Kutateladze. I'm going to put him in the C tier too. So he's a dark horse just because I feel like he's been kind of forgotten about. We can't forget that this guy has a win over Mateusz Gamrot. And at the same time, he is coming off of 2 losses, but that's, for me, what makes him a dark horse right now. As otherwise, I see him being a very hyped up fighter. And He's currently training at All Stars, which I've heard is a great gym for martial arts. A lot of talent coming out of there right now. He had a close decision with Demiris Magulov, which he unfortunately lost, but it was very competitive. And then versus Elvis Brenner in his last fight, I mean, this guy Guram was dominating for the first 2 rounds, but then this guy Brenner would just not go away, and then is able to get the TKO in the last round. So if it wasn't for that, Elvis Brenner having that type of performance, I think Guram would be in a better trajectory right now. But yeah, if he gets a good matchup this year, I can definitely see him, becoming more of this dark horse, climbing up. Yeah, I just feel like he's been forgotten about a bit here. So next up, we have Manuel Torres. So I'm going to put Manuel Torres in the B tier. So most of us probably saw Manuel Torres' incredible performance recently at UFC Mexico. He's only 28 years old, in the lightweight division. And his last, I believe, 6 fights have ended in the first round. And what I think is impressive is that half of his wins come by knockout and half of them by submission, just showing that he is a well-rounded, but also, just an incredibly entertaining fighter. So, obviously, we just had that great win versus Chris Duncan, but now it's time that he gets a step up in competition. Maybe we'll see him go out of the first round and how he looks then, just so we can find out more about him, but very promising. Next up, we've got Robelis Despaigne. I'm going to put him... I'm trying to think here. I almost want to put him in A tier, but for now, I'll have to leave him in the B tier. So, we all know about this guy. He's knocking people out in like 10 seconds, okay? And while I understand that he is probably very one-dimensional, like, I don't think this guy has ever gone to a wrestling class or anything, and I'm not sure about his jiu-jitsu. Just look at the sheer size of him. Like, the thing about the heavyweight division is that the majority of these bums are just like, they're just fat. And you being fucking built in the heavyweight division can take you a long way, especially when you have the longest reach ever in the UFC with knockout power. So I think he just cruises through anyone who's outside of the rankings. And then where it gets entertaining is when he starts fighting the guys who are like ranked about 10th, I'd say. That's when it gets entertaining. Like, give him to Ivasa or something, Give him a good matchup. Let's see if he can do it against someone, well-known, who's someone who's actually won a few fights in heavyweight. But I'm going to put him in B tier because he's got a lot of potential. Okay, so next up, the OG Dark Horse, Roman Kopylov. I'm sorry, Kopylov enjoyers, but your boy is not what he once looked like he was gonna be. I want to put him higher up, but his aura has taken a hit after being diffused by Fluffy Hernandez, picked apart. Kopylov, he does have phenomenal striking, but there's a few things about him which makes me put him in D tier. And it's like when you look into his record, he doesn't actually have any impressive wins. Like, he's only fought bums in the middleweight division, like Josh Fremd and stuff. He has that one loss to Robertson that just doesn't sit well with me. And obviously, he has improved his takedown defense a bit, which we saw in the first round against Fluffy. But I just don't know what's next for this guy now. Like, does he have to be fed strikers only? How does he handle the upper echelon, especially in the middleweight division, which is starting to become a bit more of a competitive division. Yeah, it's just not clear for me, so I can't put him any higher up right now. Next up, we have BSD. So, Benoit Saint-Denis, I want to put him in S tier, but because it says future champ and Islam is currently the champ, I cannot put him in S tier. But if there is any guy in the lightweight division who would be able to take care of Islam, it would be BSD. You know, everyone wants to talk about his last performance versus Poirier. Let's just be honest here, okay? He had staph infection. What was he doing in round 1? Manhandling Poirier, okay? He was beating up Poirier first round, worse than, Khabib was beating up Poirier in the first round. This guy, I'm not going to say he has the best boxing in the UFC, the best jiu-jitsu, the best grappling, but he just has, I'd say the Khamzat factor, He'll just storm at you and just apply his will, He'll take the fight where he wants it to go. And he does have the cardio available to keep on applying the pressure which he needs for 3 rounds. But obviously versus Poirier, the staph infection pretty clearly affected this. But yeah, I don't know who he doesn't beat in the lightweight division. I really think this guy is something special, and soon the people will see. I'm not going to elaborate much further. If you know, you know. BSD, I would put him in S tier, but Islam is something else, so I'll leave him at A right now. Next up, Isaac Dulgarian. Gonna put him in the C tier because I know he's coming off a loss against Christian Rodriguez, but what he showed me in that fight is that chain wrestling, which I just think can take you places, He's starting out. He started out very recently as a professional. He's only 6-1 now, and at the same time, he's very young at only 27 years of age. So if he can just develop, literally his gas tank and maybe some better striking too, of course, he can go places. So not much more to say really. Just while he lost, I was impressed by his performance, So next up, we've got a fan favorite named Diego Lopez. I'm going to put him in B tier. So the reason I'm putting him in B tier is because he had such a good performance against Movsar Evloev. And I think Evloev is probably due a title shot at this point if Brian Ortega doesn't get it. And unlike Dos Santos, Lopez came in, had that short notice fight where, he obviously didn't win, but he looked good. But unlike Dos Santos, he actually proved what he was about in his next fight versus Pat Sabatini. And I just think he's here to stay. And I know he's very young. He's just all around a very exciting fighter. I think he does well wherever the fight goes. So he's one to watch. So I'll leave him in B tier. Next up, Rinat Fakhretdinov. So he's not going to make it. Just to keep it that simple. 32 years old. He's on 9-win streak. But I just don't see it with this guy, okay? He's coming off a draw to Elizeu Zaleski, who, is a bit of a fraud checker. But I just don't think he's all that, That Zaleski performance really made me think worse of him. And considering his record of, 22-2, and competing in the welterweight division, I just don't see him as a dark horse really. I think he's he's done well so far, but at the same time, I kind of think he's reached his peak. So I'm just gonna have to put him in the not gonna make it tier. Next up, Sean Woodson. I'm gonna put Sean Woodson in. I'm gonna put him in the C tier. Now, Sean Woodson, I know it's a bit of a crazy pick to call him a dark horse, but I just think he's underrated. Like, if you actually look into it, Sean Woodson is he's 11-1, 31 years old, but at the same time he's 5-1 in the UFC with obviously one draw, and he's coming off a great win against Charles Jourdain, who people had a lot of expectations of, but he just showed he was the better fighter. Sean Woodson, he has this incredible reach. Some of you may know he used to compete in heavyweight when he did boxing, and now he's all the way down at featherweight. For me, he's just somewhat of a dark horse because he's just underrated. He's slept on, but I'm gonna just leave him in C tier. Next up, Jonathan Martinez. I'm gonna put him in B tier. Jonathan Martinez on a 6-fight win streak in the bantamweight division, tied for the most leg kick knockouts with Edson Barboza. I just think he has all the tools to, climb up the bantamweight division. He's very talented, very young. He's gonna have a big matchup with Jose Aldo, which it could almost be a tactical move by the UFC to get more attention to his name, as they do see that they have a prospect on their hands. So I expect big things from him. I expect him to beat Jose Aldo, probably by decision, or he could get another leg kick knockout. We'll see. So yeah, for me, he's B tier, as he's very promising, but he's also already competed at higher levels in the bantamweight division. So next up, I'm gonna put Tatsuro Taira in the A tier. So the thing about Tatsuro Taira is that I just think he has it. 24 years old on a 24 win streak. All time, that is. 15-0 professionally. I just think he has that aura of invincibility almost. I know he hasn't fought the best competition, but he just passes every challenge with flying colors. Already 5 wins in the UFC, and everyone wants to talk about the young prospects like Mokaev and stuff, but Tatsuro Taira, he needs more attention. I feel like he's really quite something. Soon he's booked to fight Tim Elliott. I think that's going to be a really good matchup, but I do see Tatsuro Taira being the minute winner in that fight. So unless Tim Elliott can pull off a crazy submission, I think Tatsuro Taira should be able to get past Tim Elliott, which will put him in the rankings, and we'll be able to see some exciting matchups in the future. So moving on, we've got Michael Morales, who I'm going to put in B tier. Now, Michael Morales, also very young, 16-0, 24 years old, fighting in the welterweight division. I just think he's good all around. He has excellent hands, good kicks. He's already fought Jake Matthews, who a lot of people hold in pretty good regard. So I just think, considering his age and I feel like he's finally stepping into his potential, and while still only being 24 years old. It's one of those guys, like a lot of people on this list, who I just think need one more big matchup, and they'll be a lot more solidified as a fighter and as a prospect. So moving on, we have the only woman on this tier list, Josephine Knutsson, who I'm gonna put in the B tier. So just quickly, she fights in the women's strawweight division. Is primarily a kickboxer with a Muay Thai style, 7-0, fighting at All Stars. Very talented. Has only had, I believe, one matchup in the UFC. She won her Contender Series fight but didn't get a contract. Then got a short notice fight versus Marnik Man, which she won 30-27. I just think she has a lot of striking upside as she's been competing in Muay Thai. And I think she'll be able to do very well as she starts getting some more challenging matchups. I know she was scheduled versus Yasmin Lucindo, which would have made for a very exciting fight. I think as long as she keeps any fight standing, she'll be able to do very well. So next up is, this one's a bit controversial as it's not really a dark horse, but Deiveson Figueiredo. I just think, obviously he can't really be classified as a dark horse as he is an ex-champion, but I just think he's slept on in the bantamweight division. You know, he left the flyweight division and people started thinking, you know, like he might be washed, you know. He just lost the belt. This is that point in the career where they switch divisions, you know, just try to get some cool matchups going. But I really think Figueiredo might be a problem in the bantamweight division. He's coming off that great win against Rob Font, where I believe he might have even been the betting underdog, which to me was crazy, considering his accolades. But when you look at his record and stuff, like, he only really has those losses to Brandon Moreno, who I think is one of those situations where Brandon Moreno just had him figured out. Like Izzy versus Whitaker, you know, one of those scenarios. But when you look at the bantamweight division, I just think Figueiredo, you know, they gave him Cody Garbrandt, which I just think is a bit too easy of a matchup. Not to speak too soon, but he should be able to take care of Garbrandt pretty easily. You know, probably could just crack his chin, get a knockout, or just a dominant decision. But after that, I think he should get a big step up. You know, he could fight like anyone top 5. It would be exciting to see him versus like Cejudo. I think maybe even Chito Vera. That would be a pretty hype matchup where I think he would win pretty easily. So I'm just gonna leave him an A tier there because I think he's still got it. So last but definitely not least, Khamzat Chimaev. Dark horse. The dark horse of the UFC. You know, the people, they're gonna keep sleeping on him, okay? He's got it, okay? I know he may have looked hurt and gassed against Usman. I know he didn't, you know, submit Gilbert Burns in the first round like he was supposed to. But the people are just, you know, they're forgetting what this guy is about. For them, his aura is gone, but they just don't see it. Like, we're looking at a guy here who has the potential to be the first triple champion in the UFC. Yeah, you fucking heard me right. This guy could be the first triple champion in the UFC. Alex Pereira, this guy submits him in the first round. DDP knocks him out on the feet in the second. Leon Edwards submits him in the first round too, okay? Now, if you don't agree with me, you can drop that shit in the comments, okay? But you won't. So just shush. He's going in the S tier, future champ. So that's pretty much it for my tier list. Let me know in the comments below who you guys would put in. If there's any picks you disagree with, if there's any dark horses who you don't see in the tier list, who should I add? Please subscribe, leave a like, and Lucas Tracy, you have to stop ducking me, bro. I know you see my videos. See you guys in the next one.